Hi, this presentation is about building skills in moral reasoning using Ethics Bowl in the classroom. I'm Celeste Harvey, and I'm Assistant Professor of Philosophy at the College of St. Mary in Omaha, Nebraska. College of St. Mary is a women's college, and I typically have classes of around 20 to 30 students. In this presentation, I want to introduce you to the way I use Ethics Bowl in my introductory ethics class to help students develop higher level moral reasoning skills. Ethics Bowl is a great organization, and if you aren't familiar with it, I hope this presentation will inspire you to look into the resources they offer and to think about how Ethics Bowl might be useful in your classroom. As background to this presentation, if you have no experience with Ethics Bowl, I would encourage you to watch the final round of the Delaware Valley High School Ethics Bowl competition available here on YouTube. You can watch about 10 minutes to get a good idea of how students interact in Ethics Bowl. What we see in this clip is a very non-adversarial style of conversation. Ethics Bowl conversations should be cooperative dialogue. The goal of Ethics Bowl is that through civil conversation, participants develop a deeper understanding of the morally relevant features of the case that they're discussing. In competition, teams win the debate not by proving their opponents wrong, but by showing depth of understanding and ability to articulate the moral issues at stake. Why should you do this, and what are the benefits for your classroom? Ethics Bowl provides robust opportunities for students to practice the skill of moral reasoning using the basic concepts that they're learning about by studying philosophical ethical theory. Ethics Bowl also helps students learn to recognize and reason about competing moral considerations in real-life scenarios. For classes that require the inclusion of applied ethical issues, Ethics Bowl studies can provide a context for near transfer of the basic moral concepts, like duties, consequences, virtues, and natural law that they're learning to reason with. By contrast, it's often far less obvious to the student how learning about constantology is supposed to help them when they're reading about animal ethics or abortion or criminal justice. Now, it's not that there's not a connection, but for the novice, it's often not obvious what that connection is. It's pretty remote. By selecting cases from the Ethics Bowl case study packs that are amenable to application of the basic moral concepts from the major moral theories, instructors can create a new context for near transfer of these concepts that students are learning to use. Additionally, the highly structured nature of these Ethics Bowl discussions makes the classroom more inclusive by encouraging many students to participate. And finally, these Ethics Bowl discussion days give instructors an opportunity to provide formative feedback. If students are misusing concepts, instructors have an opportunity to correct that, or if they're neglecting to apply concepts that should be applied, instructors can point that out. Now, how does this work? What are the concrete nuts and bolts in the classroom? I'm just going to talk to you about the way that I have come to like doing this. For me, I have students study 4 different major moral theories: utilitarianism, Kantian deontology, Aristotelian virtue ethics, and natural law. At the end of each of these units, the final day is devoted to an Ethics Bowl style case study discussion. As preparation for the case study day, students are given the case as required reading, and I ask them to provide a 1-page analysis of the case, where the prompt for that 1-page analysis is something along the lines of, how would moral theory X apply to this case? What do you think ought to be done in the case? And is it acceptable to, where I fill in the blank with something specific that helps them think about some moral issue related to the case. On the case study day, students are divided into 4 groupings, and those groupings are fixed for the rest of the semester. With 4 Ethics Bowl days over the course of the semester and 2 groups participating each day, this allows each group 2 opportunities to participate in the discussion, once as a presenting team and once as a responding team. We start out the day in groups, and I give them 10 to 20 minutes to discuss the case and come to a position as a group. Then the presenting and responding teams assemble at the front of the room facing each other, and the presenting team has 5 minutes, the responding team has 1 minute to confer, the responding team has then 3 minutes to make their case and response. The presenting team has 1 minute to confer before they close the formal timed portion of the discussion with 3 minutes to give their response. At that point, the floor is open for questions from the audience, and they can be directed at either team, and we use whatever time is left in class for that Q&A. The total time this activity takes can be anywhere from 40 to 75 minutes, depending on the time that you want to give to it. For better or worse, I give the students relatively little guidance when we go into Ethics Bowl. I tell them that the goal is not to win the debate, but to understand the moral issues better. Because the goal is not to win, they're encouraged to affirm common ground. Let others know if they think that they had a good idea. Furthermore, there's no requirement to disagree. If we want to understand the case as well as we can, and we want to come to the truth of what we think ought to be done, then we're not required to take an opposing point of view, but we should emphasize if we have different reasons for taking that same view as the other team. They should avoid ad hominem attacks. So discuss the ideas and criticize the ideas, but don't impugn the motives of the person who put those ideas forward. The flip side of that is if your ideas are criticized, don't take it personally. We want to understand these cases as best as possible, so criticism is a way to do that. While I've had some successes and I think some failures, I'll discuss the failures that I've experienced first in trying this in the classroom. When I initially started using Ethics Bowl materials in the class, I just used these cases as group discussion activities. I would hand out a case, divide the class into groups, and let them discuss the cases in groups. The problem with this is that it was rather difficult to moderate. There really wasn't enough structure to the activity, and in their discussions, students tend to arrive at a lowest common denominator consensus. Then they would report out, and it would be difficult to move their thinking forward to greater levels of complexity. They just didn't really have the intrinsic motivation to challenge one another, even if they did disagree kind of with what other people in the group were saying. The solution to that was to introduce the formal timed Ethics Bowl style conversation method and to have different groups engage in that debate. This really gave more structure, and in the Q&A, there was a more natural way to raise objections to the positions students had taken. Another problem was, well, what about the groups who are not presenting or not responding? Kind of what motive do they have to invest? Why should they care once they know that they don't have to be at the center of attention? The solution here was to introduce the question and answer time, and that gave opportunity for those in the audience to air their views if they were different than what they had heard in the discussion to that point. The solution was also to tie the Ethics Bowl day to an activity that was graded. How I do this is I assign a final paper on these case studies. Students get to pick a case study and give an analysis of it, where they have to tie in the basic concepts that we've been learning in the class. As the semester goes along, I remind the students on these Ethics Bowl days that this activity is preparatory to their final paper, and I encourage them, say, to take notes over the arguments and objections that they're hearing and encountering in case they want to write about this case study in their final paper. I would consider this activity a success in various ways. I think it really gets students to think to a deeper level. The difference between their initial analysis paper and their final paper is sometimes dramatic. And I think the Q&A period is one of the most successful moments of getting them to think more deeply about the moral issues of the case. Whether that's their peers in the audience kind of pushing back against the things they heard or things that they felt were left out, or whether that's an opportunity for me to start introducing some complexity that they hadn't considered. Seeing students reason this way in the class really gives me a clear indication of their fluency and ability to employ moral reasoning in real life situations. It's really good feedback for me. And most importantly, I think some days this is really, really fun. If students really get into it, these are some of my favorite days in class. Finally, pre-pandemic, students formed an ethics bowl club on campus after the semester had ended, and so this activity gives students an idea of how they might continue thinking about ethics even after their classes ended. There are some ongoing challenges to this activity. Sometimes in the discussion, there's really no expression of disagreement in the class. You'll get all of the groups in a single class pretty much holding the same view. Then in the Q&A, that leaves me in the position of having to play devil's advocate, which I don't mind doing, but some students don't take this very well. It feels to them like the solution is obvious here, and the professor's just drumming up unnecessary disagreement or fake controversy for no reason. Look, obviously we all agree here. And so, it's actually not even uncommon for the next section discussing the same case to all concur on some other position on the case. I haven't found a really good way of dealing with these situations or dealing with this kind of strange phenomenon in group psychology. Another thing is that really some classes love it, others are less enthusiastic. I'm not sure if there's something I'm doing in the presentation of this activity to make some classes more receptive than others. Finally, I don't have any clear formula for consistently picking cases that will engage my students. I tend to find cases that I find really interesting, and sometimes they don't resonate with students. As I said before, it's really fun when they get into it. It's not that fun when they find the case stupid or boring. So, thank you so much for watching this presentation, and I hope I'll get an opportunity to talk more with you about Ethics Bowl in the classroom. Thanks so much.